Good evening. Let your shoulders drop just a little. Let the weight of the day begin to lift. You are here now. There is nowhere else to be. Whatever was left unfinished today will wait for you. It has to. Tonight belongs to rest. If you can, let your hands uncurl. Let your jaw soften. Take one slow breath, not a dramatic one, just a quiet one. Let the air come and go. Tonight, we are going to think slowly about money. Not the anxious kind of thinking. Not the kind that makes your chest tighten or your mind spin. The restful kind. The kind where you simply understand something a little better than you did before. The topic tonight is inflation. You have heard the word probably many times. It lives in news headlines and political conversations and grocery receipts. It can sound alarming, but I want you to notice as we talk tonight that there is nothing alarming about it. It is simply a feature of the world you live in, like weather. And like weather, you do not have to fight it. You only have to understand it and then arrange your life around it, slowly and sensibly. So let us begin gently. Before we talk about inflation, let us think for a moment about what money is. This might sound like a strange place to start. You use money every day. You know what it is. But stay with me, because the answer is a little surprising, and it will help everything else make more sense. Money is not a thing exactly. It is an agreement. Think about a piece of paper currency. If you hold one in your hand, it is just paper. It has ink on it. It has numbers and faces and symbols. But the paper itself is worth almost nothing as a material. A few grams of cotton and linen pressed flat. What gives it value is that everyone around you agrees it has value. You can walk into a bakery and hand over this small piece of decorated paper, and the baker will hand you a loaf of bread. Not because the paper is worth anything in itself, but because the baker believes other people will accept it from him later, in exchange for other things he wants. And those other people believe the same, and so on. Money is a shared story, a collective agreement, a way for millions of strangers to exchange their time and effort and skills without having to barter each time. This matters for understanding inflation, because once you see that money is a story, a living, breathing agreement, you begin to understand why its value can change over time. Stories shift, agreements evolve. The meaning of a word can drift over decades, and an exact exactly that way the meaning of a unit of money, how much it can purchase, drifts too, slowly, quietly, over years. And that drift has a name. We call it inflation. Inflation is the gradual rise in the price of things over time. Another way to say it, inflation is the gradual fall in the purchasing power of money over time. They are the same thing, just seen from different directions. Prices rise, or equivalently, each unit of currency buys a little less than it used to. It happens slowly. That is the important word, slowly. Not all at once, not dramatically, just a small, quiet erosion, year after year after year. Think of it like a very slow leak in a bicycle tire. You pump the tire up in the morning. You ride. By evening, it is not flat. It is not even obviously low. But it has lost a little air. Do that day after day, week after week, and eventually you notice the ride feels slightly different. The tire is not what it was. Inflation is that slow leak in the tire of money. In most healthy economies, inflation runs somewhere around a few percent each year. That is considered normal, expected, even somewhat useful. Economists and central banks actually aim for a gentle, steady rise in prices, because a small amount of inflation signals that an economy is growing, that people are spending, that goods and services are moving. So inflation is not a malfunction. It is, in modest amounts, part of how economies breathe. What matters for you lying here, thinking quietly, is not whether inflation exists. It will. It does. It always has. What matters is that you understand what it means for the things you own, and the things you keep, and the things you do with what you earn. We will get to that slowly. Let me give you a simple picture to hold on to. Imagine that 20 years ago, a plain loaf of bread cost a certain amount. Let us say it cost 1 coin. 1 smooth, round coin. You could reach into your pocket, pull out 1 coin, and come home with bread. Now imagine that you sealed one of those coins in a small glass jar. You put it on a shelf. You forgot about it. Life carried on. 20 years pass. You find the jar. You open it. You hold the coin. It looks exactly the same. The coin has not changed. It has not rusted or shrunk or aged. It is the same coin you sealed away 2 decades ago. You take it to the bakery. The baker shakes his head gently. He is sorry. The bread now costs 2 coins, or perhaps 2.5. The same loaf, the same bread, but prices have drifted up slowly over the years. Your coin is unchanged, but it can no longer buy what it once could. This is the simplest possible illustration of inflation. The coin did not disappear. No one stole it from you, but something quietly changed in the world around it. And so the coin, by staying the same while everything else shifted, became worth a little less. This is what inflation does to money that sits still. It does not destroy it. It simply, gently, silently diminishes it. And now, with this image, you understand something quite important. You understand why a coin, or a bill, or any form of cash loses value simply by existing undisturbed in the world. Not because anyone took anything, but because the world moved on and the money did not move with it. Hold that picture for a moment. The jar on the shelf, the coin inside, the world outside shifting slowly. You might be wondering, why does this happen at all? Why do prices tend to rise over time rather than staying the same? There is not one single answer. There are a few gentle forces at work, and they combine in different ways at different times. One force is that economies tend to grow. When an economy grows, people earn more money over time. More money exists in the world. And when more money is chasing roughly the same amount of goods, the same loaves of bread, the same apartments, the same hours of skilled work, prices tend to drift upward. More money competing for the same things pushes prices gently higher. Another force is the cost of making things. The people who grow wheat need to pay for seeds, for fuel, for the machines that harvest the fields. The baker who buys that wheat needs to pay for ovens, for the building, for the hands that shape the dough. Those costs rise over time too. And as the cost of making something rises, the price of the finished thing tends to rise with it. There is also the role of central banks, the institutions that manage a country's money supply. In many countries, these banks have a goal. They want inflation to stay gentle and steady. Not too high, not zero. Just a quiet, predictable rise. They have tools to nudge it in one direction or another. But they are steering a very large ship, and the ocean has moods of its own. What is important to understand is this: inflation is not a mistake or a scandal. It is not proof that someone is cheating you. It is a natural pressure that arises from the way large, complex economies breathe and grow and change over decades. It has always been there, for as long as modern money has existed, and it will be there in some form for as long as you are alive. The right response to it is not alarm. The right response is quiet, steady understanding. You do not fear the wind. You simply learn to sail. Now let us talk about the mattress. Not literally a mattress, but the idea behind it. The instinct, an old and understandable instinct, to keep money somewhere safe and still. To put it away, somewhere you can see it or touch it, and leave it there. To feel secure knowing exactly where it is. For many people, this instinct has deep roots. There are places in the world and times in history where banks failed, where economies collapsed, where people lost everything they had placed in institutions. The impulse to keep your savings physically close, to trust your own hands more than distant systems, is not foolish. It comes from experience, from grief. But here is the gentle problem. When you keep money completely still, when you place it somewhere safe and unchanging, inflation still finds it. The money sits, the world moves, and slowly, year by year, the purchasing power of that money quietly falls. It is not dramatic. It is not a theft. You will not wake up one morning to find the bills shrunken or faded. They will look exactly the same, but what they can buy will have changed. Think of it like this. Imagine you are standing still on a moving walkway in an airport, the kind that carries people forward automatically. Everyone else steps onto the walkway and is carried along. You choose to stand in place on the ground beside it. You feel fine. You are not moving backward. But after a few minutes, you notice that everyone who got on the walkway is far ahead of you. You did not fall back on purpose. You simply did not move forward. Inflation is that walkway. It carries prices upward. If your savings are not moving, not earning, not growing, not keeping pace, then in real terms, relative to prices, you are falling gently behind. Not because you did anything wrong, simply because you stood still. This is the mattress problem, and it is important to name it, not to frighten you, but to help you see why simply holding money, without any thought for how it is positioned, comes with a quiet, invisible cost. The good news, and this is where it begins to feel better, is that there are quiet, sensible ways to let your money move forward with the world, rather than standing still beside it. Let us think about something that grows. You plant a tree, a small one. You water it at first, and then mostly you leave it alone. Seasons pass. Rain falls. The tree does not need your attention every day. It simply grows in the way trees do, following a pattern laid into its nature. After 5 years, the tree has changed. After 10 years, it has changed more. It is larger. It is more solid. It provides shade. It has become something that was not possible to hold in your hands when it was a sapling. This is a very old and very useful image for thinking about what happens when you put money into something that grows. Growing assets, things like small ownership, stakes in companies that are making real things and providing real services, things like real property that people live in and need, things that produce goods or generate income. These things tend to move with the world. When prices rise, when inflation nudges the cost of bread and rent and fuel upward, the businesses that sell those things often earn more. The value of property that people live in tends to rise along with the cost of living. Not perfectly, not predictably, not without difficult periods, but over long stretches of time, over the decades that make up a financial life, assets that participate in the real economy tend to move broadly upward. This is why when people say, "Do not leave all your savings in cash," they are not saying spend it wildly. They are not saying take reckless chances. They are saying, consider putting some of it into things that grow. Things that move with the world rather than standing still while the world moves around them. The simplest version of this idea, which you do not need to think about tonight, is that a fraction of your long-term savings invested broadly across many companies. Not one company, not a gamble, but a wide, calm spread tends, over decades, to grow in a way that outpaces the slow erosion of inflation. Not every year, not in a straight line, but over time like a tree. You do not need to understand the details of this tonight. You do not need to do anything. You only need to hear the idea and let it rest in you. The slow erosion of inflation is real, and the slow, steady growth of well-positioned assets is also real. These two forces can be brought into a kind of balance, quietly, over the years. Here is something worth noticing. Many people, when they hear the word inflation, feel something uncomfortable, a tightening, a low-level worry, as if inflation is an enemy circling outside and they must brace against it. This feeling is understandable. News about inflation is often delivered in alarmed tones because alarm attracts attention. Numbers go up. Reporters speak quickly. Politicians argue about who caused it. The whole atmosphere around the word suggests crisis. But notice what happens when you sit with inflation quietly, the way we are doing tonight. It is not a crisis. It is a condition, a feature, a property of how modern money works across time. The gap between fear and understanding when it comes to inflation is not a small one. Fear of inflation can lead people to make rushed decisions, to pull savings out of places where they were slowly growing, to make dramatic moves based on short-term headlines, to freeze in place out of anxiety. These rushed decisions often do more damage than the inflation itself would have. Understanding, on the other hand, leads somewhere calmer. It leads to a quiet recognition that this is how the world works, and that the sensible response is patient, unhurried, thoughtful positioning. Not panic, not inaction. Something in between, chosen deliberately. You are already doing something valuable right now, in this moment. You are sitting with the idea. You are letting it become familiar rather than frightening. That is, in a gentle way, the first step. The person who understands what inflation is and why it exists and what it does to different kinds of savings over time, that person is not afraid of it. They plan around it the same way you plan around winter. You do not fight winter. You simply know it is coming, and you prepare yourself slowly in the months before. So, what does planning around inflation look like? Not a spreadsheet, not a complicated system, not urgency. Let us just think gently about the shape of it. Planning around inflation means understanding that cash, money sitting in a checking account, or under a proverbial mattress, or anywhere it is not growing, slowly loses buying power. And so you might ask yourself, from time to time, is there a portion of my savings that I do not need in the next few years? A portion I could afford to leave somewhere that has a chance to grow? That question, asked calmly, without pressure, leads somewhere useful. If you have money you need soon, this month, this year, for rent or groceries or an emergency, that money should be accessible, liquid, safe. Even if it slowly loses a little to inflation, its job is to be there when you need it. That is fine. That is right. But money that you genuinely do not need soon, savings that are set aside for years from now, for something distant, that money has time on its side. Time is the ingredient that allows growth to compound, that allows the small advantage of a growing asset over a standing one to become meaningful. The old wisdom about keeping some money in things that grow is not complicated advice. It is simply the recognition that inflation exists, that it works slowly, and that the antidote to a slow erosion is a slow, patient countergrowth. You do not need to do it all at once. You do not need to do it tonight or this week. The beauty of planning around inflation is that it does not require speed. It rewards patience. It rewards quiet, consistent attention over years. A little at a time. A little better positioned this year than last year. A little more understanding today than you had yesterday. That is the shape of it. Let us zoom out for a moment. Imagine a very long stretch of time, not a year, not 5 years, but 30 or 40 years. The length of a working life. The distance between starting out and arriving somewhere. Over that stretch of time, prices will change considerably. The thing you buy today for one price will likely cost more, perhaps much more, 4 decades from now. This sounds discouraging until you also notice that wages and earnings and asset values tend to rise over that same period. A house that costs a certain amount today will likely be worth considerably more in 30 years, but so will the cost of a similar house. So will salaries on average. So will the price of the groceries inside it. Everything moves together in the same slow upward drift. The people who end up in comfortable positions, looking back over a long life, are generally not the people who found a brilliant secret. They are the people who understood early, or at least not too late, that the world moves forward, and they position themselves to move forward with it. They owned things, not extravagantly, not recklessly, but in the steady, quiet way that allows a person to participate in the growth of the economy around them rather than watching it drift past. They did not keep everything in one place. They did not keep it all in cash. They let some of it sit in things that had a chance to grow. And they were patient. Decades of patient, and the slow erosion of inflation was not the defining force of their financial lives. Growth was. This is not a guarantee. Nothing is. But the pattern holds across very long spans of time and across many different economies and across many different kinds of investors. Not clever ones, not professional ones, just patient ones. You do not have to be extraordinary. You only have to be consistent and patient and willing to understand a little more each year. And now, gently, we are near the end. You have spent some time tonight with the idea of inflation. You have let it become a little less unfamiliar, a little less frightening. You know that it is not a disaster. It is a slow drift, the gradual rise of prices, the gradual softening of what a unit of money can buy. It has always been part of how money works. It will continue to be. You know that money left completely still is quietly, gently eroded by this drift, not stolen, not destroyed, just slowly worth a little less each year, the way a tide slowly reshapes a shoreline. And you know that there is something on the other side of this. Assets that grow. Things that participate in the real economy, that move forward with the world. These are the quiet counterweight to inflation's quiet pressure. You do not need to act on any of this tonight. You do not need to make a plan or open an account or call anyone. Tonight was only about understanding, about letting a word that once felt heavy become something you can hold in your hand, turn over gently, and set down without worry. The world will carry on its slow adjustments tomorrow, and the day after, and the year after that. Prices will move as they always have, and you will move with them a little more wisely now, a little less afraid. Let your breath slow now. Let your thoughts begin to soften and drift. You have done enough for one evening. You have learned something real. And now you can let it settle into you the way a good meal settles, quietly, without effort, simply becoming part of you while you rest. Sleep well. There is nothing urgent here. There is only time and patience and the long, slow arc of a life lived a little more wisely with each passing year. Good night.